Call to order. Good evening. Welcome. And I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Nevada City Council. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. It's 5:30 and we are ready to go. Adam, if you would please read the tribal recognition.
You bet. We acknowledge that the Nisenan people are still here among us today, though nearly invisible. We understand that we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the near genocide of their people. As a resident or visitor in Nisenan land, we support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in efforts to stabilize their people, as well as their campaign to restore federal recognition.
Thank you, Adam. And Lou, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to note that both Mayor Fleming and Vice Mayor Fernandez are not with us for legitimate reasons, and both will be absent. And with that, Madam City Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Councilmember Ceci?
Here.
Councilmember Klein?
Here.
Councilmember Peterson?
Here. All right, so public comment, Government Code 54954.3 provides that any member of the public may address the city council on a matter not on the agenda. This is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. The Brown Act, with limited exceptions, does not allow the council or staff to discuss issues brought forth under public comment. The council cannot take action on non-agenda items. Concerns may be referred to staff or placed on a future agenda. Please note that comments from the public will also be taken on each agenda item at the time that it is heard. Do we have any public comment? I see none in the audience.
And none virtually.
And none virtually. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it off to our, let's see, roll call vote. I don't think we need to approve an agenda here, as we only have one item.
Correct.
You're up.
Thank you. We're having a little bit of technical challenges, but we'll be getting Steve on here in a couple minutes. I have the first part anyway. It's been a awesome. It's been an honor and mostly fun and some not so fun to be here for the last year. But I would say it's like 99% fun, which is a good ratio. So this will be the second budget that the council has seen in my time here, and I'd really like to thank the council, this council and the previous council for your leadership in turning around the city from being 2 years behind with budget and audit to being not only caught up on both, but a little bit ahead. So with this meeting tonight, we have a little bit more than a month to take your direction or recommendations for changes tonight, if there are any, and create the final budget for your adoption at the first meeting in June. Last year when we went through the budget process and you adopted the budget, we talked about that it was an expansion of our previous budget, had more detail, more transparency, but also that more change would be coming, mostly in the format and style and best practices. So, what we're presenting you tonight is that change in format that would be worthy of a GFOA, or the Government Finance Officers Association, award for budget. So that is something that is in our previous budgets was impossible because it didn't contain many of the elements that are required, some of which are a lot of work for people like Steve, others of which are relatively easy, like we have to have a glossary. You can't be a GFOA award-winning budget without a glossary. So your budget tonight doesn't have one. It's a working budget, but the one that you will be presented in June will have a glossary. It'll have all those those elements. So also tonight we're presenting the newly created capital improvement program format. So it translates from what was previously essentially an internal working document for Brian, your city engineer. It expands it into a comprehensive, all departments, full range city capital improvement program, which includes some non-traditional items like deferred maintenance on facilities and open space. Somewhat traditional to see a fleet replacement program in CIPs, but we have not had one here before. So when we get to there, we'll share with you that. So as always, the budget you see here in the workshop's been prepared in compliance with the State of California Government Code. It incorporates your financial management policies that you've adopted, as well as your newly adopted investment policy. You'll have the first quarter 2023 investment report on your next agenda on May 10th. So that's also Steve's work, but it's already done and in the system. The presented budget before you tonight and whatever we bring to you in June will be balanced in that in this case, the revenues exceed expenditures within the general fund. And it's what we would call balanced better in that our general fund reserves are maintained or are enhanced over the current year's budget. The total general fund budget proposed in the workshop is $6,294,880 against $6,319,821 of general fund revenues. That, in comparison to last year's budget, is about a 6% growth year over year. It's a 2% growth against the mid-year budget that you just adopted last month. The most significant driver of our expenditures is a 4% base salary increase for all of our employees. That's effective July 1. I would like to celebrate that and not consider that something that's a bad thing to have increasing costs for employees. I appreciate the council's position in trying to, advance appropriate and comparable pay for our folks, so that the reality of it, without mincing words, is we have great people that have stayed here because they're committed to the place. But when you have places that could poach our employees, we need to every year look at paying somewhere in a comparable range. And so that's a 3-year contract. This budget will have a 4% raise, so will the next year. The most significant impact on non-recurring expenses is that we were awarded a Prop 64 grant. It is $3 million over the next 5 years. $600,000 of that $3 million is in this budget. That is all Prop 64 revenues and expenditures. So while it's shown as a general fund revenue and expenditure, it really comes from somewhere else. This presented budget also includes the provisions of medical insurance for the city council members. This is important to me as a city manager. If it's not important to you as the council, you could certainly ask me to withdraw it, but it recognizes that the health of all of our employees are valuable, whether you make minimum wage and somewhere under $30,000 a year, or you make $100,000 a year, or in the case of the council, you make $0 a year for your contributions to the community. The health is important, and funding that in the budget is, while not inexpensive, doesn't cost us any more than it costs us to provide that coverage to any of our other employees, regardless of their salary. So I do hope to bring a small council stipend for payment into the discussion in the next budget year, but that was not that wouldn't be reflected in this budget year anyway, because we wouldn't be able to offer that until the seating of a new council. The presented workshop budget also includes the addition of some full-time positions. First is a community outreach and fire or community risk reduction officer. This will be funded out of Measure C funding. This will be the liaison to the Fire Safety Advisory Committee and really to the community at large for all things outreach. This person will be doing parcel inspections and business inspections for fire prevention, but they'll also be at all of our events with booths and sharing things about fire and risk reduction in the community. Also, soliciting input from the community. They'll have a large public information role and social media role. I really, this will be an important, given that we could argue all day long about what number our strategic initiatives are. I purposely didn't put a number on them, but we have commented multiple times that fire is either number one or number two. And so this is a position that supports one of the top two strategic initiatives in the city. The position will work under the city manager, and while that sounds a little strange because it's a fire-focused employee, the reason for that is that we contract with Grass Valley for emergency services. Chief Goodspeed obviously is a city employee, but largely this allows us to separate the incredible work that the men and women of the fire department do, which is largely emergency response, and the community's need for a liaison for fire prevention and safety and things in their home and green waste on their property and that kind of thing. So it's a very different kind of position, and so that's why it will be working directly for me instead of for the fire department. The budget also includes, and we will include for the next 5 budgets, a corporal school resource officer. This is funded out of that $600,000 of Prop 64. This will be a year-round schools and parks officer. It funds a fuels reduction equipment operator, also Prop 64 funded, dedicated to maintaining the city's open spaces. So everything from our 3 parks, and if you don't know that we have 3 parks, then you grab on our website, but we actually do. We have Pioneer, Callanan, and Penzance Park. We also have a Penzance room at City Hall. If you haven't seen that, come visit us. And this position will essentially be running the masticator that was grant funded out of the last Prop 64 grant, or a grader, or a weed whacker, or a battery powered lawnmower, which is also funded out of the Prop 64 grant. But really looking at ways to make our city-owned properties both fire safe and not a nuisance to the adjoining properties. And this position will work closely with that community risk reduction outreach position to do things like comprehensive citywide green waste removal. So it's great that we have green waste days. I appreciate that, you taking that over, Councilmember Klein. But we know that there are some folks in our community that will never be able to get their green waste to the Root Center and have it on their property. So if we can, partner between the outreach person and the person that, removes the green waste from the city property to do things like place green waste dumpsters, or say, in this street segment, you can just drop it on the street and we'll scoop it up and take it to the dumpster. Things like that will, bring the ability for removing what amounts to fuel from people's property into reasonableness, whereas it might not be reasonable for people right now. And then lastly, there is what we're categorizing as a human resources risk management technician. This would be a general fund position, and that would include some offset of part-time hours that we currently attribute to Parks and Recreation to do some of the more intense work in the office for Dawn during the summer. Really what this is it helps us eliminate some of our single points of failure, both in finance and HR as well as in customer service. So today, if you come into City Hall and it's anything other than police department activity, you're going to see Tanya. Tanya also is going to process all of the business licenses. She's also going to process a couple $1 million a year in checks from a variety of sources. She's also going to do all of the utility billing. She's also going to be mailing out all of the newsletters, and then the 50,000 other things that we assign to her on any given day. And so that means there's times when we don't answer the phone because she's doing something else. Brittany, who sits around the corner from her in the audience with us, has different job responsibilities, but a similar myriad of tasks to accomplish. And so, if Brittany's not here for a week, then no checks get cut. And, and Gabby, who is your deputy city clerk, is also all things human resources and payroll. So this position really lets us take some of the roles out of each of those individuals, not a ton of them, but also gives us the capacity that, if Tanya's not here, that you would have someone else that could cover the front desk, so that Brittany doesn't have to stop writing checks to do so. It's a critical position, and it will allow us to have some continuity in our both our customer service and our internal support. So all of the budget is really centered around your direction in the strategic plan. Each department in the budget has a blank page that says something like key initiatives. We will probably retitle that, but essentially what will happen is once we get your direction tonight and as we create the permanent budget or the draft budget for your adoption in June, all of the strategic initiatives and their goals within each initiative will have objectives that speak to them that are assigned to individual departments. So, for example, you just recently adopted a vacant storefronts ordinance, and so there will be objectives both in the police department for code enforcement as well as in planning for your city planner, Amy, to implement that vacant storefronts process. And then we will track that work and report back to you on that work, both for its, effectiveness as well as its practicality, because some things can be very effective and not be what you want them to be. We will provide that detail in the budget, and then we'll also provide in the final draft budget the use of American Rescue Plan Act derived funds. So the intention there would be to, as a placeholder, assign those funds to advance the goals within specific initiatives. Not every initiative will have exactly the same amount of money, but it kind of does work out that each of them need a planning document of some kind, and each of them need some kind of operational money to jumpstart some activity. So the intent would be that we would, that money is sitting in restricted reserves currently. So it would be placeholders for that when we actually are going to do the activity or incur an expenditure, we'll come back to you and ask for that authorization. So it's not a slush fund that the city manager could spend without you knowing anything about it, is the reason for that. And I wouldn't ask you for that. There is a lot to this budget, but I would say that it's pretty simple to read. The format is consistent across all of the departments. The graphics are consistent across all the departments. And, really, I would say if you like anything in the budget as far as the things that we've changed and the things that we'll be able to accomplish with the budget, then really the full credit goes to the staff that has been here through the challenging times, whether it is, all of the department heads, all of the worker bees and everyone in between has been great, but, certainly Tanya and Gabby and Brittany in the finance end, full credit to them. If you like anything about the format, that's all Steve. And if you don't like anything, then you can blame it on me. But most importantly, let me know tonight so that we can make sure that get back on track for your direction for next month. The capital improvement program, the CIP, goes from, I think, 3 pages to something like 83 pages. And really it is to provide more detail, but it is also to make it a financial instrument. So the CIP is a companion to the budget. They need to be able to talk the same language, and the money needs to be able to be represented the same in both documents. And that's what you'll see tonight. The workshop CIP includes an all funds 5-year, $48 million and change CIP, which for a city of, we gained 84 people last year according to the California Department of Finance. So we're almost a city of 3,300. That's a pretty good 5-year CIP. Now, I would share with you a very large chunk of that CIP is the multimodal project up on the highway to put the roundabouts as far as total amount of money. And much of those projects are not funded. They will be seeking funds as we go. The CIP includes a 5-year, $1.89 million rolling stock replacement program, much of which will be funded in budgets and or funding streams that we've already established for the police department's fleet replacement program. CIP also has $1.4 million in department capital projects. These are things that staff knows we need to do, that people like me never got into the budget for some reason, but we will know that we need to over time, and so they'll get plugged in as funds become available. Some of them will get plugged into the CIP, others will just get plugged into the budget as a department item to accomplish. So one of that came off the list this year and is funded in the budget is a remodel of the upstairs of the police department to accommodate their staff and the number of people that they have and the number of desks and those kind of things. So we also are showing that in our facilities, we have about $98,000 of expenses that we are not budgeting for, and we've never budgeted for. And it's okay that we haven't, but to know that, you know, to take care of the 6 air conditioning units on the roof of this building and to repaint the outside of Harmony Books and to do the myriad of other things that are needed for all the facilities we own, there is an expense. And so we'll seek to include that in future years' budgets, because what practically happens is either one, those things don't get done, and they should be done, or two, we take the time and resources allocated to the public works crews to do those things and sacrifice other things that that budget was intended for, neither of which are tenable in the long term, so we're calling those things out for long-term adjustments. And then lastly, the CIP includes an annualized maintenance cost for the little over 400 acres that the city is responsible for maintaining in open space. Not all of that we own. The great majority of it we own, with the exception of where our water treatment facility is on federal lands that we lease. So that is a conservative estimate of maintenance of about $404,000 a year that we currently don't provide. Some of that will be done by that fire fuels mitigation operator that is funded from Prop 64, but certainly not the majority of it. And it also assumes that all of those lands can just be maintained. And while that may be true for some of our slivers, it will certainly be true for some of our property as we get grants to fund the fire mitigation project along Deer Creek. It is definitely not true today, for example, at Hirschman's, where we would need a $500,000 project to get that into a situation where it was maintenance mode. So all of that content at the end or the back of the CIP is to daylight the things that we have not done in the past and we need to do in the future. And I'd love to be able to tell you everything's fine, but that wouldn't be the truth. And so, this is a good budget. We're moving in the right direction. We're addressing a lot of the things, but there will always be things to improve upon. And if we don't identify those challenges that we know exist today, they won't be captured in future years' budgets. So that is why they are there. And with that, it's probably enough of me yapping. I'm happy to answer any questions and interject as we go, but I will hand it over to Steve, who will be able to present the numbers and share with you both the budget and the CIP, but feel free to ask questions anytime as we're going through. You don't have to hold them until the end and then forget. Well, that's what I would do, but you certainly don't have to. Mr. Erlinson.
Good evening, council members Peterson, Klein, and Sussy. Good evening, Mr. Grayson. Good evening, Ms. Chris Takes. Before you this evening is the fiscal year 23-24 proposed operating and CIP budget for the city of Nevada City. Let me share my screen here, if I may. Let's see. There we go. Okay. And is everybody able to see the budget
Yes.
on my screen? Okay, perfect. So the budget document is a little different than what you have seen before, but essentially it's been broken out into general information with an organizational chart, personnel by summary with about 4 years of history, some revenue detail and summaries, some expenditure summaries for you by fund, by department, by expenditure type, and then expenditures and funding sources related to each individual department or function within the city. And then finally, you have your 1-year capital improvement program, which is sliced and diced in a couple of different ways, which will also tie out to the 5-year CIP document immediately following the operating budget here. So there's a generic organizational chart for you. Personnel by summary, Sean indicated the positions that he is requesting for the upcoming fiscal year, but also again, various information going back to 1920 about your staffing levels.
1920.
And I've also presented it graphically by department for everybody as well. So your position counts are increasing by, there should be a net increase of about 3 employees because we're adding 4 positions and we're eliminating one, if you will, which would be the CFO position, and replacing that with a finance manager. So there's a net effect of 3 overall. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes here. The summary of estimated revenues and appropriations and estimated changes in fund balances. So this page here represents every single fund that you have within the city of Nevada City. So your general fund, your capital projects fund, and then your various special revenue funds, which you have a myriad of. Your enterprise funds being your water and wastewater activities. And what I have done here is I've estimated the ending fund balance for the current fiscal year that we're in, which becomes the beginning fund balance as of July 1 of 2023, based upon activity year to date and what we presented to you at mid-year budget back in February. And then proposed revenues that we have identified for 23-24, along with proposed appropriations for 23-24. What I have done this time that's a little different than what has been done in the past is CIP projects were charged directly to special revenue funds. And it was kind of hard to track what was going on with the various projects, accounting for it that way. The city's capital projects fund was not being used to track the various CIP projects. So the one change I have proposed is actually using the city's capital projects fund, Fund 115, and transferring the various funding sources out of those respective special revenue funds, general fund, wherever that funding source may be, and directly have the expenditures come out of the CIP or capital projects fund, and assigning project numbers to the various CIP projects. That way we always know where we are in process with each individual CIP project. So that is one difference. Most of your funds have activity, revenue coming in, appropriations going out. You'll see that as we work through the detail pages for each department and the CIP projects. But overall, total revenues citywide are expected to be approximately $19.5 million, with total appropriations expected to be about $20.5 million. For a citywide total fund or total fund balances of approximately $13.5 million. Now, I would like to state that, as Sean was saying earlier, we're actually balanced better on a current resources basis. The reason why the appropriations look larger than the revenues is because with the CIP projects, I couldn't make heads nor tails of past budgetary amounts. It was very hard for me to track and figure out. So Sean, City Manager Grayson and I thought, well, we'll just start from scratch, basically. So amounts that have been appropriated in the past, we're reappropriating this time around. So we're not actually using fund balance for CIP projects. We're reappropriating what's already been I'll say appropriated, if that makes sense. Just so we have a clean break and we can track all these projects and their funding sources anew. Down here,
Can I ask a question, Steve?
yes, please.
So basically what you did was zero them out and then reestablish them?
That's exactly what I've been doing. I did, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. So the next page is a schedule of interfund transfers. So that just shows you where the money is going to be transferring out of and into your capital projects fund for 23-24. So we have a few graphs here, your general fund expenditures and revenues. Because of the way that the budget format is now, I had to make some slight adjustments to what you've normally seen in the past regarding your general fund expenses, general fund revenues. But this is very similar to what you've been presented with last year and a few years before that. So it breaks down general government safety planning, basically all the functions of government, including your CIP program for your expenses. And that's just the general fund component. Same thing with revenues. So it's broken out between property taxes, your permits and licensing, program income, and then other taxes, which would be like your rent or your room tax or your TOT taxes, et cetera. And then sales tax, which also includes your Measure F taxes and all that. And then that's broken into a pie chart for you to see kind of where graphically the bulk of your expenditures are and where the bulk of your revenues are coming from on the general fund side. And as you can see, safety makes up about 52% of your total expenditures in the general fund. And on the revenue side, sales taxes are your biggest revenue component, followed by property tax.
Steve, what are the other taxes?
I'm sorry?
There's a 17% other taxes. What are they?
Yes.
Room, TOT.
So,
TOT
yeah, so
and-
your other taxes are your room tax, which is also known as transient occupancy tax, and that brings in a little over $500,000 a year. Given certain circumstances, we're actually estimating a little more than $500,000 for 23-24. Other taxes also include things such as your franchise fees. Those are considered taxes. That's about $150,000. When I get to the revenue detail, I actually have everything broken out by taxes, what those are comprised of, what your licenses and fees are. So I can show you that actually clearly and what we're estimating for each one at that point. So if I may address that question in probably in about 2 minutes, I can actually show you in black and white here. So here I've provided you a two-year comparison of estimated revenues by fund. I broke out general fund between taxes, licenses, and permits, so on and so forth. And what's presented for you is your 2022-23 adopted budget, the amendments to revenues that were made at mid-year budget, and then what is being proposed as far as revenues citywide for 23-24. Ultimately, your general fund revenues are anticipated to increase by 2% at this point. When I was forecasting revenues, I was very conservative. And because it's better to report your or budget your revenues a little less than to overstate them. But I do believe that what is presented as far as revenues are realistic. A lot of time and effort went into forecasting them, and Nevada City should hit that mark, all else being equal. Same thing with your special revenue funds, any grants that we believe we are receiving or will be receiving based upon awards that we know we're getting or have gotten towards the end of this fiscal year, items that have been received in the past, but that we're now going to recognize as revenue and appropriate this fiscal year as part of your CIP or anything. That's all, those revenues are tied right here. Things that you have not recognized before. And there's a revenue, sorry, there's a cell referencing issue here. So I will make note of that, Sean, and I will correct that on this page. But your total revenue and other sources should be the 14.4 and change citywide that I showed you on the change in fund balance page. So here's the revenue detail, and to answer the previous question about what are other taxes. So your room tax of $510,000 is one of them. Property transfer fees are another at 15. Franchises at 165. Again, your sales taxes are comprised of these items. But basically what we're looking at, an increase of about $70,000 from your amended 22-23 budget to your 23-24 proposed budget, just in your general taxes citywide. No significant increases or decreases there. Sales taxes are projected to decrease just very slightly by about $10,000 roughly. That estimate comes from our third-party sales tax consultant, HDL, but pretty much on par with what we estimated at mid-year budget. Licenses and permits, I'm projecting a decrease there of approximately $22,000. And that's a result of cannabis permits. After speaking with Amy Wolfson and her last name escapes me, but Amanda in code enforcement, based upon the number of permits that are currently active, possibly one new permit coming online, and a couple of, current permits that are going away, so to speak. I'll use that terminology, and the fees related to these permits. Realistically, it looks like $50,000 would roll in for cannabis permits for 23-24 instead of the 70 that was forecasted as of mid-year budget. Interest income or use of money in property, which is interest income, your corporate yard and building rents and program income, is going to increase slightly less than $50,000. So your interest income is going up. That's a function of an increase in interest rates. And and reinvesting lower yielding securities into higher yielding securities. We just actually had a reinvestment of $250,000 from a CD with a low yielding rate into a government sponsored entity bond that occurred in April, where we picked up about 2.5–3% yield upon maturity of that CD. So your interest income is projected to increase. And then your corporate yard and building rents are projected to be about $104,000 this year versus the $81,000 that was forecasted at mid-year budget. On the general fund side, related to intergovernmental, that decrease from amended budget to proposed budget is strictly related to insurance claims, one-time revenues. That's related to the, I guess what's called the mill building or barn building at the Public Works Yard. You'll see in the CIP section that the replacement of that building would cost about $500,000. That's what's projected right now. Last year, we received insurance claim proceeds of approximately $322,000. We estimate that we'll receive another $178,000 and change once the building is replaced. Charges for services. Again, these are all the fees that you charge individual users for things such as planning fees, park fees, pool admissions, etc. And some of those fees or some of these charges for services items we expect to increase. Others we think we're going to see maybe a slight decrease based upon projected activity. But all in all, your charges for services are anticipated to increase by approximately $13,200. I'm sorry, $11,000.
Steve,
Yes.
I noticed the line for tennis lights. We used to charge by coin operation, right, for turning on the tennis lights, and we don't do that anymore. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's why it's nothing.
Zeroed out.
Yeah, okay.
But it costs us more to clean up the machine and get the gum and the slugs out of it than it did we collected in coins, so that should be a negative number.
Fines and forfeitures. So those are all your parking citations, basically traffic safety and abandoned vehicle abatement fees. Parking citations based upon the activity that we've seen this year, and I think some other parking related items that have occurred during the course of the year. We're expecting citations to increase by about $15,000 based upon activity. Traffic safety criminal fines and forfeitures based upon the way items have been trending, at least this part of the year, and it's kind of all over the place with these criminal fines and forfeitures. I wanted to be safe, and I only budgeted revenue of $5,000. If it so happens that come mid-year budget for 23-24, there's more revenue that's been received than the $5,000, I'll true it up there. But I wanted to be conservative and not just wing it. And the same holds true with abandoned vehicle abatement fees. So all in there, your fines and forfeitures are projected to decrease by about $2,000, but basically on par with prior year. And again, that's due to some fiscal conservatism from staff. And then you have miscellaneous revenues. Probably the biggest change you see here, the reason for the biggest change is under the line item miscellaneous, which in parentheses it says includes admin charge. This is directly related to the 10% admin charge that the city can apply towards the Prop 64 grant. So this is estimated based upon the current expenses Prop 64 expenses that you will see later on as we go through the departmental expenditure detail. So again, all in, your total general fund revenues are anticipated to be 6.3 million. So about $134,000 more than the prior fiscal year.
So Steve, I was looking at that and the 2% increase from mid-year, looks to me like it's sales tax. Is that accurate? The increase primarily? Or is it really dispersed through there?
The 2% increase year over year?
So when Sean presented, he spoke to revenues increasing 2% above what was expected, what we approved at the mid-year budget. And I was just being my curious self and thinking that thinking it would look like sales tax to me, but it could be dispersed through there.
So it is kind of dispersed. So your property tax your property taxes are increasing slightly. We've estimated a 2% increase in your secured current year and prior year secured and unsecured, your supplementals, other than your supplemental priors. But overall property tax is projected to increase by about 2%. I haven't received yet the number directly from the county as far as what they think might happen. But this is my best guess, having kind of seen and knowing what's going on in the markets right now.
So I think it's secured property tax and TOT are the biggest increase drivers versus mid-year. And the biggest decrease is on sales tax.
Okay.
So, because sales tax is coming in a little $10,000 under against mid-year
Thank you.
in next year's budget.
Thank you.
Yes, that's correct. So then what follows is all of your special revenue funds and your enterprise funds that you have. AB 1600 charges for services. So these are pretty much your admin, police, parks, mitigation fees. Again, those kind of fluctuate. So I opted not to budget for them right now until mid-year to see where we're trending with revenues at that point in time. PNR Quimby, we're not expecting anything. We haven't recorded or had any actual revenue at this point. Or if it was, it's very minimal for PNR Quimby in the current fiscal year that we're in. Donations and contributions, I tend to not budget for those until we've actually received donations and contributions, not knowing if anybody's going to donate or not. Historically, it's been below $1,000, but in 2021, it exceeded $2,600. We don't have anticipated at this point any Department of Transportation LLP revenues or grants coming in the near future, so no revenues are projected there. The HBP grant fund, so what you see here, the $5,752,500 grant reimbursement, that is the full amount of the grant. And again, going back to my previous explanation, not knowing really or being able to track down with any absolute certainty what had been budgeted in the past, and the way the kind of the accounting was, we were starting with a clean slate. So in 22-23, I was able to determine that $2,655,900 was budgeted for the HBP grant. But going back in time, I couldn't determine what really was being budgeted and what wasn't. So again, just starting with a clean slate so we can actually know what's in there and then track it going forward. Gas tax revenues. So there are a few of those various sections, 2103, 2105, et cetera, and your SB1 monies. For 23-24, at this point in time, the California State Department of Finance is estimating that in total, the city would receive $197,318 in various gas tax revenues, including SB1 monies, versus the $112,000 that was estimated at mid-year. Again, we're not anticipating any grant reimbursements related to the NCTC funds. CMAQ funding, it's estimated that we should claim reimbursement for $701,070. That's related to a few CIP projects at the back of this document and in your 5-year CIP fund. Regional traffic mitigation, that's a pretty consistent number year over year. So I went ahead and budgeted for that, approximately $26,800. The FEMA fund, as you know, the city has been working diligently on fixing storm damage from not too long ago, and we're anticipating, hopefully, that in 23-24 we can get reimbursement for those costs, which right now are estimated to be about $744,250. No revenue projected for Indian Trails, nothing for the PSPS grant. Cal OES, at this point, we're not anticipating any reimbursement from them. Same thing with Little Deer Creek and Brownsfield EPA. No projected reimbursements or any revenues coming in. Your two fire department tax funds, which are special assessments, again, budgeted for those based upon pretty much prior year trends and what we're kind of seeing in this current fiscal year. Again, those can always be trued up at mid-year. No activity in the CDBG fund on the revenue side. In the CABY miscellaneous agency fund, nothing there as well. The regional trails program, the city has received a grant for $219,000. That's related to the Sugarloaf Trail project, which is described again in the 5-year CIP and at the back of the operating budget document. Prop 172, we're anticipating about $40,000 in revenues there. Supplemental law enforcement, the baseline revenues that usually come in for the city are about $100,000. But there's generally a true-up payment towards the first half, somewhere in the first half of the fiscal year. So when that does occur at mid-year budget, I will true up that number for your supplemental law enforcement funds.
And that's the fund we've been using essentially for the de facto police fleet replacement. At $100,000 a year, that gets us about one fully outfitted police vehicle. And so we got, with fund balance, we got 2 last year. We just purchased one additional. The Prop 64 grant will buy one on for the SRO, School Resource Officer, so we will be a little bit ahead. So Dan will have 1 year of maybe an extra $100,000 to go to other things from the SLP fund. But that, when I said earlier that the fleet replacement has general fund money and grant fund money and a separate fund for police, this is the fund that we're talking about.
Measure C, your Measure C fund is projected to decrease slightly, about $7,000. And again, that estimate comes from our third-party sales tax consultant. ARPA funds, the city did receive ARPA monies in fiscal year 22-23. We had made mention at mid-year budget back in February that we were going to recognize the remaining portion of the revenue, and that the city manager would work with the council on eventually appropriating these monies in 23-24 and as part of our cycle. So we're just recognizing the ARPA monies that have already been received by the city as revenue in 23-24 when the expenditures might begin to occur. Proposition 64, the city just received a $3 million grant over a 5-year period related to Prop 64. I went ahead and just divided that by 5 to recognize about $600,000 in revenue annually. Again, that amount can be trued up based upon what actually occurs at mid-year budget. There's Proposition 68 funding, again, $216,411. That's not a new grant. Again, this is a function of reappropriating what's left over and recognizing the revenue associated with that budgetarily, I might add. And these are related to the playground project and I believe also tennis court resurfacing in the CIP portion of the budget. So those were all of your special revenue funds. Your enterprise funds, which are your water fund and your sewer fund, we're expecting a slight increase in revenues related to water. And as you can see, it's broken out here by residential, multifamily, connection fees, etc. We're expecting right now about a $26,000 increase year over year. On with the sewer fund, again, revenues have been steadily increasing. We're projecting a little over $1.6 million related to sewer fund revenues for the upcoming 23-24 fiscal year.
And this July, we will apply the last of the increases of sewer rate increases, the sequential year rate increases,
Yes.
Based on the January, February water use, but it is applied, as you know, in July. So while there is an increase here, there's also an increase in rates. So we would predict that this would level out and/or our expenses will exceed our revenues in both of these categories, all things being equal. So that will be something that we'll definitely need to look at with the infrastructure committee and the full council as we proceed and make sure that our enterprise funds they're intended. They can make money. That's not our intent, but they certainly do not make money now, which means we are in some fashion supplementing them with general fund monies.
Which is actually fine to do as long as we agree to do that,
Yes, it should be a conscious decision of the council, not of,
not just a default.
yes.
So your Measure M fund, in this case, we're anticipating about $925,000 in sales taxes. This, for 22-23, we didn't amend Measure M monies based upon the way things were trending, but through the date of publication for the budget here, Measure M monies were a little over $700,000. And based upon the trend going forward and analysis, 22-23 is probably going to exceed 835,000. And looking at activity and our HDL consultant, again, helping us with these numbers, it appears that Measure M should come out to about $925,000.
What's that? Ask him, I don't know. What's Becker?
So again, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what is Becker? Yeah, it's a fund listed
After Measure M.
after Measure M.
Yeah. I am not sure what Becker is. I haven't, there is no activity other than interest income because that fund does have a cash balance in it, and interest earnings are allocated across various funds based upon
So it's making
using a
money.
pooled cash method. But I'm not sure what the Becker fund is as of yet.
It looks like it's an initial allocation, much like an endowment, that's been generating interest over time, but that doesn't have expenditures associated with it, not in the time that I've been here, so it's not an active account.
But it's mysteriously generating revenue?
Oh, it has money, yeah, it has
Because
revenue.
of the way revenue
Or
is
has
distributed
fund,
across
has
funds.
fund balance.
Yeah. 300.
And so there's some interesting oddities, in our budget. That is one of them. Another one that is completely unwound is the what we refer to as cottage. So the monies generated from the rent at the house that is currently used as Good and Company Realty goes directly into an account that is traditionally accessible as its own checking account for the fire department. Because when the city bought the private fire department, Fire Station Number 2, the hose company there, the house came with it. So the revenue generated went to the fire department. Well, we contract for fire services now, so there's not a reason for that checking account. So those kind of things they had a purpose, but I'm sure we will find more over time. By the time we get to budget, we'll have an explanation for adopting budget in June. We'll have an explanation for Becker for you.
It's just that is $310, right? And so, I mean, I'll let it go, right? It's too in the weeds, but it costs more than $310 to account for that
To find out what it is.
than it does to, you get it.
So again, your total revenues citywide are 19,490,393, and that number tracks throughout this first part of the budget, which you have seen.
Brian, you know what Becker is?
Yeah. Bill or Neil.
Appropriations. So this is a summary of what you'll see in the detail, on the detail pages by department. Here I broke out your appropriations by fund, again showing you last year's adopted and amended budget versus proposed. So 20,537,481. You saw that on the change in fund balance page. This number also tracks throughout the document. So this is all inclusive: general fund, your CIP fund, and then all your special revenue and enterprise funds. So again, this number and this of 20.5 million and this increase of 33%, again, I want to remind everybody, incorporates that starting anew with the CIP and reappropriating budgetary amounts so we can track them. Again, the same same appropriations, this time just broken out by department and expenditure type. So by department, you can see where the appropriations are going. Are they going to, what portion is going to personnel, M&O, and capital outlay? And again, total city ties out to the $20.5 million. So I've sliced and diced the appropriations for you, so you can see it presented in a different way, depending on what your preference is. On this page, this is the appropriation summary. This is by fund, by program. So your programs are general government, public safety, planning, engineering, and public works, water and wastewater, and CIP. So it's broken down by general fund, the program that it falls in, the department within that program. So for example, general government, and city council, city manager, finance, city attorney, community agency, city clerk, so on and so forth. And again, broken out by personnel, M&O, capital outlay, and for anything capital improvement related, there's a column there. So again, just another way of presenting it. I went way too far. My apologies. So all in, again, citywide, your totals are $20,537,481. So just another way to reflect what your appropriations are with slightly more detail as to where the money is being proposed to be expended. I've also given you a 5-year overview of departmental appropriations. So your fiscal years 1920, 2021, and 21-22 come from your audited financial statements. And 22-23 amended comes from what was presented to you at our mid-year budget that we held in February. And then 23-24 proposed is what's proposed in the various departmental detail pages. And again, that ties out to the 20.5 million that you continuously see here. I also broke out your appropriations by fund over 5 years. So you can see where the monies were being appropriated for the last half decade and what's being proposed for this upcoming fiscal year. And again, 20.5 million. So just again, a different way to slice it and dice it, depending on what kind of information you're looking for. So now we're at the point in the budget where the actual detail by department is presented to everybody, to the end user of the document. So the first part of the detail pages sorry, I'm trying to search for the word, entail general government. So you have 6 departments or functions, if you will, under the general government category. Those are city clerk, city manager, city council, finance and admin, city attorney, and community agency. So within the general government program, so these 6 departments or functions as a whole, year over year, you have an increase of $862,833, or a 95% increase. But again, I would like to remind you, and you'll see this as we go into the department detail pages, and a little further down this page as well, that a lot of this is it's not an increase to your general fund appropriations. These increases are related to grant funding that the city has received. So it's actually a very good story to tell. We're getting more done with outside funding. So I presented the various departmental appropriations for you graphically.
Excuse me, Steve. Sean, you might want to talk about the tripling of the city council proposed.
That is essentially the provision of a medical insurance for the council. There's
you.
a minor increase in all of our costs, but that is, in previous years, you won't see anything reflected under the personnel cost for council, and you'll see $72,000 in the personnel cost for council this year, bringing you up to the $96,000 or whatever it is which is why that 300-something% increase. Not anything you did, anything, it's something I'm trying to offer. Again, if you don't like it, you can say no.
So here are your various funding sources, going back to 21-22 through today's proposed budget. So you have, in this current fiscal year, obviously, general fund funding. That's increased about almost $500,000, but that's related to, some new positions that are being proposed. Measure C funding, and that's related to a position, that's going to be covered by a position that's being proposed, and then some Proposition 64 expenditures for your total increase. And again, I broke out your appropriations by expenditure type. So where's the money going? Personnel, M&O, capital outlay. And again, the funding sources. So again, however you'd like to slice and dice that information, it's there at your fingertips. So each departmental
Steve,
page
I'm
is
sorry,
very
Steve,
similar.
if I could, Steve.
Yes.
I just wanted to point to the bar chart under general government appropriations by expenditure type. I'm not sure that that's complete. You have 3 categories to the left, and unless I'm missing,
You know what that looks like?
it just shows personnel, doesn't show capital, and doesn't show M&O. The bar charts. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah, no, you know what? I need to fix that because the, what is that? I think the x-axis, it should be in increments of 10%. And here it is, it starts at 50 and 100. So I think things weren't cut off. And capital outlay is a negative amount in this fund. So yes, I will need to refresh that graph and fix the axis.
Thank you.
That'll remedy that. Thank you. And I'm making a note of it right now. Thank you. So now we're at the departmental pages. So the first departmental page relates to city council. So throughout the rest of the document, there is a description of the department, in your case, city council, prior year accomplishments that the city council is very proud of. As Sean mentioned a little earlier, key projects and future initiatives. We'll be working with the various the council on and to determine what the city council wants to do or how they want to achieve their strategic initiatives, and the other departments as well. So that's kind of a general statement throughout the rest of the document. Sean had mentioned that should. Page 40 will be going away here. So I apologize for that. Because we're gonna handle all the personnel up at the front of the document. So city council departmental summary. So you had asked, well, what is that tripling of the city council's budget related to? That's related to personnel, primarily. Your M&O had about an 18% increase. Capital outlay remains flat. And the $72,000 increase is related to health insurance for the city council. But what we anticipate possibly being the cost for medical insurance going forward.
And that's if each of us adopt it, right?
Correct.
Yes. Really, your budget is increasing on the M&O side, related to due subscriptions and publications. You really should have some money for those types of items. And in 21-22, you had actual expenditures within the city department budget of $1,450. Nothing was budgeted in fiscal year 22-23. So I threw it back in there because historically, you have had dues and subscriptions and publications related items within your department. So it's not uncommon. It's actually very common for city councils to have a line item like that in their budgets. And same thing with conferences and meetings. You know, 2,500, which was budgeted for 22-23, was actually less than what your actual expenditures were in 21-22. And really, I think based upon what the city council normally goes to and other item or other meetings and conferences that you might need to have, that number really should be closer to $5,000. So we want to make sure you have ample funds to conduct city council business. So all in, you're increasing. Wait, what is going on here? I'm sorry. Let me look at something. That is not. Your total budget's increasing by $76,000. There's a link here that I need to fix also. So let me make a note of that. And again, primarily related to health insurance for the city council. Okay, city manager. I won't belabor any more of this. What you saw with the city council is what you'll see with city manager and the other departments. So budgetarily, year over year, the city manager's department budget is going to increase by about 40%, or $137,000 roughly. Now, that might look bad, but it really, as I was saying earlier, with general government, it really isn't. As you can see, general fund appropriations are decreasing by about $97,000 in the city manager's budget. And a new position that's being proposed, a community services officer, is funded by Measure C. So between the decrease in general fund monies and the Measure C funding, the increase of $137,000 is really a function of non-general fund appropriations. So with the departmental detail, as you've seen, general fund items are, line items are white, and then any special revenue funding source is going to be color coded, which again you'd see right up here on page 45. Nice. So Measure C is kind of like a light pink, looks like to me. Any ARPA monies would be kind of a salmon or orangey color, beige color maybe, to help you break it out. That's why you see multiple or repetitive account names, but they're color coded. That way you clearly see how things are being appropriated and funded. So again, with salaries and all the various benefits, the salaries and benefits that you see in this budget for 23-24, and again, this is true for every department that you'll see going forward. Those are actual salaries multiplied by the 4% increase per the various MOUs. And then obviously Social Security, things like that, incentive pays, those are all actuals that are tied to salaries. It's a function of salaries. So these are actual numbers to the penny, including workers' comp and all of that.
A lot of depth.
So for personnel, again, 19% increase for the city manager's department. For personnel, and that is a new position funded by Measure C. M&O, an increase year over year of about $3,600. And that's just a function of, again, training and development, conferences and meetings, and a budget for gas and oil related to the city manager's vehicle that wasn't budgeted for in the prior year or in the current fiscal year that we're in. And then fixed assets related to Measure C, the new position, I believe that's for a new vehicle, if I'm not mistaken, Sean.
Correct.
And then, of course, what's called the A87 cost allocation. So fixed assets throughout the city. There's a cost allocation plan that the city has, and it just so happens that the city manager's department, this has been true for many years, actually, I'll use the term, has a reduction in cost related to fixed assets versus some of the other departments in the city. Are there any questions on the city manager's budget? Okay. And I'm sorry if I'm going into too much detail. Please let me know, and I can go through this however you would like me to.
Let me check in with my colleagues here. How are we doing? You want this level of detail, or you want departmental level, or you want all of the expenditures?
We have not come up with a meaningful question so far, and we've been at it for an hour and 15 minutes.
That's,
I mean, I read it before I got here, so.
well, it's kind of where I am, Steve. I've spent several hours with this budget already, so maybe if we could keep it at a higher level and move through, I think I'm getting some agreement on that from my colleagues.
It would be my pleasure.
Thank you.
So I'll cover it, if I may. There are no significant changes to the city clerk's budget. Other than so not on the personnel side, you only have one elected city clerk. We did, though, on the M&O side, make some significant, or proposing some significant investment in conferences and meetings, but primarily training and development for this upcoming fiscal year. So that's where your change is there. Finance, really, the increase is related to an HR risk management technician position, the positions that Sean spoke about at the beginning of the workshop here. In addition to a Prop 64 funded new financial software system for the city. And that should be coming to you at your next council meeting, or at least seeking pre-approval. But I've incorporated that into the budget using Prop 64 monies at this point in time, or assuming hopefully we can use Prop 64 monies at this point in time. So those will result in the major increases to the finance and admin budget of a little over $500,000. City attorney, no significant changes year over year. So that's flat. Community agency, again, that's going up a little bit, but again, these are related to Prop 64 dollars and various items, agency contributions. So I think like vape testing kits are some of them, some of the items. So, but quite a myriad of things that we can use Prop 64 dollars for that will benefit the community ultimately. Public safety.
So, sorry, Steve. So our community agency fund is essentially the way that the council provides money to things outside of the city's direct control. So it is where we budget the transient occupancy tax that we give to the Chamber of Commerce, and now we have an agreement with them that says what they will do with that, in other words, what the performance is. That's where we pay for things that you approve, like the Wild and Scenic Film Festival sponsorship or the Nevada City Film Festival sponsorship. It's where we'll pay for our indigenous reciprocity monies that we give to the Nissan. It's where we pay for the water bill because it's NID for the narrow gauge train museum because the city owns that facility and they don't pay for the water, we pay for the water. So that's why you see utility billing on what we're giving to others. And historically, we've just kind of budgeted a number in there. We're trying to be much more accurate, and then we'll true it up every year. And in order to get on that list, the council has to approve it, and you should be approving what the community value that you get for your investment. All the things you invest in now have tremendous return to the city in some fashion. And then the Prop 64 items that you see in there are all things that we, for example, he noted the vape detectors and camera systems. We did that for Seven Hills on the previous Prop 64 grant. We'll be doing it for sale and for Forest Charter on this next Prop 64 grant. So that will be ultimately money coming from Prop 64 and going out to an outside entity. So while it's a relatively small number, it represents the city council's investment in things outside the city's direct control, either for the betterment of the overall community or because in the case of like the chamber and the film festivals, it actually does result in a direct return on investment into our businesses, into the city, into our taxation and the like. So it's a small number, but it's a pretty important fund, especially because it is solely your authority to distribute those funds. So anytime you're going to ask me to give more money or less money, it's going to be coming out of this fund. So
Your own candy jar, huh?
thank you, Steve.
Public safety, which comprises fire and police. Overall, your public safety program is only increasing by 2%. That's with the addition of a proposed corporal / school resource officer, which would be funded by various funding sources here. I believe Prop 64. Measure C pays for your agreement, your user agreement with Grass Valley Fire. Supplemental law enforcement, as Sean said, pretty much covers capital outlay for the police department, as he mentioned earlier. But all in, a 2% increase in public safety is really phenomenal. Fire department, is an 11% increase, but again, that's a function of retirement. It's a function of health insurance that wasn't budgeted for in 22-23, but is going to be budgeted for in 23-24. So there are actual expenditures. There was just no budget in place for it. So actually budgeting properly for items that occur, especially as it relates to personnel, are included in the document now. So that's why you would see an increase like that. Measure C, funding for the agreement with Grass Valley Fire. Normally, there's a set contribution for Measure C that goes to offset or to assist the city general fund in paying for that agreement. This year, we're using we're recommending the use of 1/3 of the Measure C fund balance to offset some of the general fund costs. And you see that down here. And then there's some Prop 64 related capital outlay or fixed asset purchases that are being recommended as well as part of the budget.
That's
And then I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's a generator, a new roof, and apparatus bay doors for the fire station.
All for $110,000.
Correct.
What's your contractor?
Police department, their total departmental budget's decreasing by 1%. And that, again, is a function of some personnel items. As you can see, there are quite a few various funding sources related to the police department. There's Measure C, Prop 64, and supplemental law enforcement. So I know it looks like a rainbow, but that's a good thing. Outside funding sources to get things done. So I won't spend any more time on that unless you'd like me to. Again, it's a decrease year over year with no cut, with actually proposed enhanced service going forward. Planning department, or the planning function, consists of the planning department and the planning commission. Overall, a 5% increase year over year. That's really a function of the MOU with a 4% increase across the board. Public works and engineering. So their budget year over year is expected to decrease by about $98,000 or 8%. And again, that's due to the truing up of how various positions within the Public Works Department, how those various positions are allocated based upon their current allocation in payroll. So the budget document in the past has not mirrored really or it has not been updated to mirror the true allocation and the true work that's occurring within the various functions within Public Works and water and wastewater. And then truing up using actual salaries, it's kind of saved some dollars, I will say. Now, there are also a new position being proposed to fuels mitigation. I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, Sean.
Good enough.
Fuels mitigation operator, or that you talked about earlier. That's proposed as a Prop 64 funded position. And what I ended up doing is, because Measure M is its own separate fund, I just want to touch on this real quick.
That's good.
I threw that under the umbrella of engineering and public works and have kept everything as a separate fund. So you can see really where the dollars are being spent on the M&O, or the operating side, I should say. And again, all the personnel costs are actuals. So actually using actuals actually saves you some money, including on the workers' compensation side, instead of just guessing. Using the actual pure premium rates based upon the positions that are charged to Measure M budgetarily saved you quite a bit of money, as well as the allocation of PERS pay-as-you-go costs, plus the allocation of the PERS unfunded liability that's farmed out to the various departments as well. On the M&O side, we're expecting costs to remain flat. And on the capital outlay side, again, because now we're not charging projects directly to funds, but we're going to transfer monies out, your capital outlay decreased as well. Parks and Recreation, just that program is also just the department. There's an increase there of about $177,000, but that's related to Proposition 64, a $1 million capital outlay item. And I think that's for a land for a future, correct me if I'm misstating it, Sean. It's a proposed land acquisition for a future CIP project, I believe.
So that is to convert the field, ostensibly the flag football field at Seven Hills Middle School, into a year-round turf field, and also that will become a public park after hours of the school. This is modeled after what Grass Valley has done at Lima Gilmore and Margaret Scotton over there, so very successfully. And Prop 64 funded $1 million.
Thank you, Sean.
Sean, is the idea for that people would contact Don and say, we want to have it for these 2 hours?
No, it'll be under the control of the school, so they will schedule, if leagues are going to play there or anything like that. But if there isn't anything scheduled, then it's just open to the public.
Right.
Just like Pioneer Park, if there isn't anything scheduled in the lower field, the Little League's not playing there, it's just open for anyone. We won't be taking over the scheduling,
Okay.
mostly because Don doesn't want to.
Yeah.
It's a lot of extra work, and it's physically attached to the school, so we'll let them keep
Let
that.
them do it. Okay, cool. Fun.
Okay. And then water and wastewater. So that encompasses your water department, water distribution, sewer department, and sewer collection functions. So amongst your entire program there of water and wastewater, we're actually anticipating a decrease in appropriations from current fiscal year to proposed 23-24 by about $393,000. And so as you can see on the personnel side, again, that's because of the truing up of salaries using actuals rather than just budgetary amounts, so to speak. Some savings on the M&O side, as well as savings on the capital outlay side. So the water and wastewater program concludes the operating budget portion of this document. The last piece of this document before we get to the 5-year CIP document is your capital improvement projects that are proposed for the current year. And those are broken out by fund and by function. And as you saw at the very beginning of the document, before we went into the detail pages, your total CIP is estimated to be almost $8.9 million. So that includes new projects that are being proposed, plus all of the legacy projects that we're starting anew with, so to speak, on a budgetary basis. So the majority of your CIP deals with streets and roads. I think the largest project is going to be your Nevada Street Bridge project, followed by, some the Public Works Mill building that's going to be replaced, and a few other smaller projects. So I broke out the appropriations for these projects by funding source. And again, that all ties out to almost $8.9 million. And then behind that is the detail for all those CIP projects that you've seen kind of summarized at this point. So this page deals with your various streets, sidewalks, and roads projects. So it gives a brief little project description, and then the total amount that is we're requesting be appropriated in this fiscal year. And the same holds true for all of your other classifications of CIP. So buildings, Pioneer Park, trails, and then your water, wastewater items.
Steve?
And I can answer any questions you have on the CIP. These same projects are in the first year of your 5-year CIP, which immediately follows this portion of the budget.
I just want to note that you will make a correction on 122 in the description of the Clark Street and Nevada Street Bridge descriptions.
Yes, let's see. Page 122, Nevada, Clark Street.
Yeah, they don't have anything to do with Main Street and wooden
yes.
sidewalks.
I will fix that as well.
Neither does the
Good
Nevada
catch,
Street
Lee.
Bridge, which is a duplicate below it. We'll fix it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I apologize about that.
No biggie, considering the size of this document.
Exactly, exactly my thought.
All right, on to the CIP. Any questions, comments, thoughts on the budget before we go to CIP?
You want to do it that way?
It's however you would like to do it.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think, but did we not look at the CIP at the last meeting, or was?
You looked at infrastructure.
Infrastructure Committee.
That's right, yeah.
We've had a glance already.
Yeah, a lot of budget stuff in my head at the moment, so.
Yeah, the CIP is really the 5-year view. You see in the budget the 1 year that's going to be in fiscal year 23, 24 there with the corrections that we'll make. So the remainder of the CIP is really a planning document, and you certainly could comment on it, but anything other than what is presented here in the budget would be out years, so it won't be materialized until the future anyway. So, if you want to talk about budget now, while we just got through it, and then talk about CIP, we could do it that way, or we could finish the presentation and then talk a little.
I don't need to go to each one of these projects in any detail.
Steve, is it possible to maybe do a few highlights on the CIP, or
Share the format maybe, and
the format, and then we can wrap it up and do all of our questions? That would be my preference.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So your CIP is presented in summary by funding source, beginning on page 1 through page 4. And as you can see, as Sean was mentioning, fiscal year 23-24 grand total, it ties out to your operating budget document, operating and CIP budget document. So those are all the various funding sources that the city will receive. Then there's also another way to present it, which is your CIP by function. So by streets and roads, buildings, Pioneer Park, etc. And it's color coded for ease of reference as you get to the CIP detail pages. So you can hopefully easily try to find what you're looking for. And again, that column, the grand total sums to the almost 8.9 million. And then the detail pages at this moment do not include the recommendations from the infrastructure committee, such as a percent funded item on each of the detail pages. That will be there at the time of budget adoption. But the detail sheets are pretty much, tells you what the project is all about, the reasons why we're going to engage in this project, the status of the project, and then again, funding sources, anticipated project costs, and then the responsible department and project manager. And eventually there will be exhibits, pictures, maps that will accompany each project with respect to these detail sheets. And I can entertain any questions you may have, unless you'd like me to specifically address a particular project.
Do you have anything?
No question on a particular project, but I do think the insertion of maps on anything that has to do with streets, sidewalks, or parks is going to help the public understand what's going on. Because just reading that, for example, the first one, the Railroad Avenue sidewalk is going to be extended by 1,500 feet. Well, does that take it all the way to Woods Court or not? I think that's what a public would, constituent would want to know. And a map would easily explain that.
Perfect.
Do you want to roll to the back section after the individual sheets, Steve? And I'll hit on that real quick.
Okay, good.
So there we go. The project page for each one. This is the rolling stock replacement program. This is a listing of all of our vehicles throughout the city, across all the departments. At the top of the list are the only ones that are replaceable, or we anticipate replacing in the first 5 years. So you'll see it's not. It's about a third of our fleet to be replaced in the 5-year program. We would anticipate by the time we get to the next 5-year portion of the fleet replacement that everything except for law enforcement and fire will be required to be electric. There was today came out of committee, and we anticipate that will be approved and signed by the governor, some carve-outs for local government in regards to electrification of fleet. It largely won't do much for us. So this will probably be the last 5-year CIP that we do, or fleet replacement program that we do, that it still will involve primarily buying gas vehicles. Most of our vehicles are used for public works and a variety of other things, not really suitable for electric at this point. So that's what that is. Bluetooth pairing, awesome.
Something awry.
Can you get the remote and put the push exit on that TV? Up here, this TV. So the, I think you should just be able to push exit. Mike's phone at McGee's is trying to pair with our television, would be my guess. The next part is departmental level capital projects. These may not be CIP projects, but some of them may be. These are currently, so some of them are funded through, like, for example, Prop 64. Some of them say general fund, meaning that that would be the only way that we could fund them short of getting a future grant. There's one up there that has nothing. It says public-private project. That is the 775 Zion property that we own. It's currently occupied by the SPD Saw Shop, the former Caltrans yard. That could be redeveloped for a variety of purposes. That would be a CAP project if we undertook that. But this is essentially a list of projects that we will need to accomplish at some point that we are currently not funding either in the budget or the CIP, other than the ones that are identified as Prop 64. And then this is facilities deferred maintenance. So if I'm sure that Gary has had to do these endeavors where you have hundreds of facilities, so you have 1,000 air conditioning units, and you can't have them all go bad at one time because you couldn't afford it to take up your whole. Fortunately, we don't have to deal with that. This list is the entirety of the facilities that we are responsible for for maintenance of. Although I would say it's relatively large still. Could you go back, Steve, to the one page up? And so most of it is roof, air conditioning, and exterior paint, because that's kind of the routine maintenance things that we need to go for. You'll notice some of them, like the band shell, just says paint because it doesn't have an air conditioning, and the roof is pretty much what the structure is. So it wouldn't be maintenance, it'd be replacement. But we also include all of our parking lots for surfacing, striping, and signage. So this would be, it's only $98,000, but we don't budget for this currently. So these are things that we will start to phase into the budget so that we're not having the Public Works crew use their existing resources and time to do this work at the sacrifice of something else. So we can account for both. And then the next page is the same concept, but is for all of our open space. So it's broken down by location and acreage, and then an annualized maintenance cost. You'll see some of them can be relatively large and have a small cost of maintenance. And then some of them are relatively small and have a relatively large cost of maintenance. It just depends on what the facility is and what kind of fuel is there and that kind of thing. But on the low side, for 413.3 acres that we're responsible for maintaining, it's about a little over $400,000 a year that we are currently not budgeting to provide. Now, that's nobody's fault, but we acquired a lot of land, 413.3 acres of land, and we never put aside any money to maintain it. No endowments, no 10% or 20% of purchase price or anything like that. So it's nobody's fault, but we do need to address it. And so the first way to address it is to identify it as a need. And then the next steps will be to include it in a prioritized basis into our budget over time. Because obviously some of these spots could go another 170 years without maintenance and probably not have great impact, where others maybe can't get through 2023 without having great impact. So that is why that section is in there. And I think that's it is the last page. So 199 pages. Anything else to add there, Steve, before the council takes over?
No, sir.
Okay,
Thanks, Steve.
yeah,
Very thorough, thank you.
yeah,
And I love the layout of the project.
it's all good. The color coding knocks me out. That's so cool. All right, so I think we'll start with public comment. If there's any public comment in the audience? Okay, there isn't any. Do we have any comment online, Madam Clerk?
We have no attendees.
Okay. So I will then turn to my colleagues. Who would like to go? I'm very, very egalitarian. So,
That's nice of you. I just have a quick one. I'm looking at page 170 on this PDF about Firehouse 2. I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. Is the idea that this is one that we're looking at for fiscal year 26 to 27? Is that the idea? Look for a miscellaneous grant, and then during that fiscal year, that's when Firehouse 2 is going to get the remodel. Am I reading that correctly?
Page 170, yeah, the Firehouse number 2 remodel. Yeah, so the 26, 27 would be the year that we would shoot to have that work done.
Okay.
So that would mean that we would need to secure a grant before that time.
Yeah.
It's impractical to say, it's true that the work needs to be done today. It's impractical to say that we will shoot to get it done today because we don't have a funding source. That project specifically is Firehouse number 2. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not going to fall down. But it is, it has been used, the upstairs and the downstairs, for a variety of things, leased out to classes, things like that. It does not have an ADA accessible walkway on the side, although those steps are newer than they appear. So this project would bring that, entire station into a, same aesthetic, same look, but, safer and more usable condition.
Well, yeah, 'cause it
And
could
the
be more-
balcony would
It could
be-
be more useful.
It could be.
Absolutely. And then, yes, we could invite people to go on the balcony that were not, today it's only city employees for insurance reasons.
I just asked that because I was asked about that, and now I have a better answer than, oh.
And that's among the, the staff is amazing here, obviously, and Brian knows more about the city than probably, he's one of the few people that's hunkered down and crawled through our storm drains and the pipe at Stonehouse and, all these different things. And so he knows these things inside and out. And so part of my job is to take that and put it into actionable activities here. And so that is, we don't have $500,000 to put in there. If this is important to the council in coming years, then you will direct me to find a grant and by that deadline. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
And each of these projects will come up for debate and discussion in the council at the appropriate time, right?
So essentially, when you're adopting this, although these projects exist, you can add projects at any time as the council. What we want to do, this is step one from a kind of the engineering-focused project list. Now, this is a more comprehensive or holistic approach. The next iteration will be to bring it to the infrastructure committee for recommendations, and then ultimately to the council to prioritize these items, so that by the time we get to mid-year budget and eventually next year's budget, it will say, for example, this is a fiscal year 26-27 item. It's going to cost $500,000, no general fund, but it is high priority. As opposed to another one might say it's only costs $100,000, but we're never going to do it unless you get grant money, So that way it lets us set up for, do we need to budget for grant matching? Do we need to budget to pay a grant writer if it's that important? If grants are available, and it'll also let us, when we go out to bid for grant writing services, we'll have a prioritized list of projects and their overall costs and where they come from, so they can, be seeking grants that would match what the council's prioritization of projects are. That prioritization doesn't exist today.
Okay. My question actually is a little bit, has a slightly different slant. This is a wonderful report, and it's very detailed, and I doubt anyone in the city has read it other than the people in this room. So I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for the people in affected neighborhoods, like Upper Nevada Street, when the sidewalk goes in, for them to say, hey, this is what we think about that project. Will that come?
Yeah, so in theory, the purpose, or one of the purposes of the infrastructure committee would be to vet those things. What is the community's input versus what's the council's input versus what is staff's input on various projects. Most projects are going to be heavily staff-driven, right? So Brian is our subject matter expert on all of these things. However, he doesn't live on the part of Nevada Street that doesn't have a sidewalk, so clearly I would think the infrastructure committee would be interested in what the community's input might be on that project. So I think that it's up to the council. We can do it however we want, but those existing committees are a great place to solicit that input.
That's you guys? Is that the two of you?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about tennis court lights, but I think we've learned the importance of engaging our community and the impact of our projects in their vicinity.
It's easier to talk about it on the front end than to argue about it on the back end.
That's my take on it. Did you have anything else?
No, that was it.
Wow. Okay. I got just a few things. One, first of all, Steve, congratulations. This is a beautiful document. I'm going to do my budget geek thing here, but I always tell my story about this is why I'm sitting at this table when I picked up a budget that I could not read, and I'm hearing the way you had to reorganize it and stuff. But this is a budget, and the idea of a budget for me, and I've done many budgets like this, most of them much larger than this, but we now know how much money we have. We now know where it comes from. We know where we're going to spend it, which is all laid out with our best forecasting, and it allows us as a council to begin to make decisions about the resources that we have. It also is and should always be a public document that folks can pick up, read, and with perhaps a little guidance, find the information that they need. It becomes a document that allows us to communicate our priorities and how we're going to operate. And this budget does that. It goes well beyond that, as a matter of fact, when we get into the rolling stock, which I think is so important, fleet management that can become so costly. I'm super fond of the community agency piece because that's something I've seen councils let that get away from them, just taking money out of the candy jar here, because frankly every elected official wants. I was trained by another public works director that every elected official wants 2 jars on their desk one has favors and one has money in it, and that you want to hand those out. And as a council, that can get away from you, actually,
I
with
don't even have a desk.
I know, I know. We operate it differently, but we want to be able to support our community, but this gives us an opportunity to really articulate, as Sean said, we should never give money without understanding what the return is on that money. And this opens up those conversations in really useful ways, because we need to do this. We need to support our community. We are a tourist-based economy. We need to bring people into our town in order for this to work. And this gives us a really strong mechanism. I also wanted to comment that I met with Councilmember Fernandez yesterday, Vice Mayor Fernandez yesterday, for some time to talk about the budget, and she was unable to be here. She had an unavoidable conflict tonight, but she wanted to speak to the quality of the piece around the community agency and the support of the Nisenan efforts, and how important she saw that. Like myself, she was curious. The question has been answered about the position that moves under Sean as the sort of fire safety piece, which is really good. We just needed to understand where it came from, and I think we're both clear on that now. But I look to the fire committee and the work that you folks have done. But with the new ordinance that we approved, this position is critical to that, and it's really separate from fire. It's totally linked to fire, but it is not a fire department position, and that's the way the structure was built when we did the combining of departments. So it allows us as a city to take those things on, something that's really important to our community. And yeah, I've moved from water to fire being the most important issue. I think particularly after the amount of rainfall this winter, but it gives us a really, the city says, we're hearing you, we're investing in it, we understand this is a priority. And that's really important, and I think it's really great that it goes under the city manager's position. Can't get much higher than that, and the oversight is critical. So I think that's super important. Steve, your conservative approach, that was always my budget training, which is underestimate revenues and what did I see? We overestimate expenditures and underestimate revenues and balance that way, and you're always going to have a surplus at the end, hopefully. But it's the right way to do it, and I think you've done an excellent job with that. Let's see. I really like, and this is just me, and this is my public works head, but the deferred maintenance piece is really critical, because those are the things that our city is made of, and we've got to invest in them. You've got to, I've run too many facilities. I'm a preventive maintenance fanatic. You spend a little as you go, or all of a sudden the whole thing turns to dust and you got to spend a fortune to fix it. So it also, I think it sets us up in some really important ways for conversations with our community about how we take on some of these really important things and how we can fund those. And this starts that conversation. And I think that's what a budget really, really does at its best, is open up the door for these really important conversations about who we are as a community and then how we resource those things. So I'm thrilled with the budget, Steve. You're good at this, and I think you've probably done a few of these. But I really, really like the budget. I think we're in great shape, and I know it's going to change again. It's going to morph, particularly as we start to set priorities around capital improvement. My one concern about all of this, and particularly the capital improvement, and I'm starting to hear this in the community, and it's my conversation with Sean all the time. How are you going to do all this stuff and get it all done and survive it? So how do we build capacity? How do we do this? Because clearly we're demonstrating the ability to bring in outside revenues, which is critical to us. Every one of those colored bars is somebody else's money we're spending to run our town. And great. But how do you manage that? How do you do that? How do we think with such a limited staff that how do we think about getting that money and using it in a way that allows us to be sustainable as an organization? And along those lines, I'm really pleased to see the HR position, because the other thing I would flag because I'm really happy to see the 4% now and the 4% again. But the greatest challenges that is faced by local government, and we're no different than that, is retention of quality employees. And how do we do that? And we have to do that by taking care of our employees, and incentivize them and be a workplace where people want to be. I think we're doing that, but it also has to be supported with funding. You've got to be competitive in this market. Quality costs, and we need the quality. We have a small staff, and we need the right people to do it. So I think as I think about the HR, I think about that and budget priorities going forward. And I think I'll stop there. But just to say that, it's 2.5 years ago, I couldn't read this budget. And now I'm just frankly just over the moon about a budget. So thank you so much, and I think it's a great budget. And with that said, comments from the city manager, or what did you need from us? Do you have adequate direction? Do you?
We took a lot of notes, and we can always, play back the video, but we will, that's all I need. You don't need to take any action tonight. We'll bring back to you for the first meeting in June an adoptable budget, CIP, and all the related items, the GAN limit, and the other things that we're obligated to do as part of the budget, but really, appreciate both the comments on the structure, but also what the direction we're trying to do. There will be lots of opportunities for the individual committees and the whole council to make minor course corrections for us, because one of the things that can easily happen is we say, this is great, and we start running in this direction, and 3/4 of the way through the year, you're like, I thought we were supposed to run in that direction, so as these things come up, the additional, as we look at infrastructure committee, looking at the CIP, as we look at the goals and objectives in the strategic plan, as we come up on mid-year, as you look at your value statements again, always be considering, can we refine can you refine the overall direction you provide us, so that we make sure that we can make minor course corrections instead of, the ones that take forever to.
Gotta dance.
Yeah, we're driving a Ferrari here, so we can turn quickly. We're not an oil tanker like Gary's budget probably was in Salinas, but, no. We got what we need. Appreciate the input.
And Steve, any final words from you, Steve?
I appreciate the time that the city council has taken this evening to review the budget, to make recommendations, and I've had a blast working with the city staff, and especially Mr. Grayson and all of you on the 5-year CIP budget to make to plan out a course for the future of Nevada City. It's really exciting, and I thank you for the opportunity.
You're doing, it's great stuff, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
One last comment.
Absolutely.
I want to thank the staff that has sat through this entire meeting silently, but, attentively. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, and all the work that you've done behind the scenes on this budget. I know how you build these things. You've all spent a lot of time from your departments, giving your input, making sure that the numbers were right. Probably a few discussions with the city manager along the way about what got funded and what didn't. And I see the chief smiling, so I suspect, but that's how it works. That's how we get there.
No drones, but he got a blimp, so.
Oh, cool. Got a dog. All right, with that, let's see. We will do any, it is a workshop, but any final reports, comments, agenda items? Okay, I would accept a motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
I second that.